When I married my husband, Mark, I already understood that becoming a stepmother would never be a simple path. He had a son, David, who was just 15 at the time. I still remember the first moment I met him, tall for his age, quiet, and carrying a heaviness in his eyes that I couldn't quite understand. It was the kind of weight you often see in kids who've lived through a divorce. David's mom and Mark had separated when he was only 8. And even though Mark did everything he could to be present, the truth was that David had grown up between two homes, never fully rooted in either. When I entered their lives, I made myself a promise: I would never try to replace his mother, but I hoped I could become someone he could trust, someone steady, someone safe. Over the years, I watched David slowly evolve from a closed-off teenager into a young man. He had his quirks. He loved taking apart old radios, filling spiral notebooks with scribbles, and listening to music that seemed like it belonged to another era. Mark and I often joked that he had an old soul. Still, he kept much of himself locked away, letting pieces slip out only in brief, unguarded moments. By the time David turned 21, he had grown into a tall, thoughtful young man with sharp blue eyes and a gentle way about him. He was polite, careful with his words, and always respectful, but he still carried an air of distance. He lived with us while attending a nearby college, and though he spent hours tucked away in his room, I never minded. I assumed that was just how young men were: quiet, private, protective of their space. But one evening, something happened that changed the way I saw him forever. It was around 11 at night. Mark had gone to bed early because he had work the next morning, and I stayed up folding laundry in the living room. As I carried a stack of towels upstairs, I noticed David's bedroom door was slightly ajar. A soft, warm light poured into the hallway. Normally, I would have walked right past, but something made me pause. I heard faint music drifting from inside an acoustic guitar, slow and aching. Curiosity got the better of me. I nudged the door open just a little wider, and that's when I stumbled onto a moment that felt almost sacred. David was sitting on the floor with his guitar resting across his lap, his head bowed over the strings. In front of him lay a worn notebook, its pages filled with messy handwriting and lyrics. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, as if the words were too delicate to release into the world. It wasn't just music. It was raw emotion, spilled open without restraint. His voice cracked once or twice, but that only made it more real. I realized I was seeing a version of David he had never shared with anyone. This wasn't the polite, quiet young man who moved through the house gently. This was David stripped down to his truth, pouring his soul into the only place he felt safe. For a second, I froze in the doorway, unsure if I should step back or let him know I was there. But the floor creaked beneath my foot, and David's head snapped up. His eyes widened in shock, and he quickly set the guitar aside, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tense. I lifted my hands in apology. "I'm so sorry, David. I wasn't trying to intrude. I was just passing by, and I heard your music." His face flushed red, and he ran a shaky hand through his hair. "It's nothing, just something I do to pass the time." But I knew it wasn't nothing. There was too much pain, too much beauty, too much honesty in what I had heard. I offered him a gentle smile. "David, it's not nothing. It's incredible. You're really talented." He shook his head quickly. "No, you don't understand. It's not good. It's just me trying to deal with stuff." That was when I realized this wasn't simply a hobby for him. This was how he processed life, how he carried wounds no one else could see. I stepped further into the room and placed the towels on his bed. "David," I said softly, "you never have to hide that part of yourself. What you're doing is beautiful. It's honest, and it takes courage to put your feelings into words." He stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether he could trust what I said. Eventually, his shoulders loosened and the tension faded from his eyes. "You really think so?" "I don't just think so," I told him. "I'm certain." That night became a turning point for us. For the first time, David allowed me into the world he kept hidden. He showed me pages of lyrics he had written, poems about loneliness, about the divorce, about feeling torn between two families. Some were angry, some heartbreakingly sad, and others surprisingly hopeful. As he read them aloud, his voice trembled, but I listened with everything in me. When he finished, I looked at him with tears in my eyes. "David, you have a gift. Don't ever doubt that." For the first time in years, I saw a real smile spread across his face. A quiet, genuine smile that told me he finally felt seen. From that night on, our relationship changed. He started sharing his songs with me, sometimes late at night when Mark was already asleep. I would sit beside him on the floor, listening as he poured himself into his music. He admitted he dreamed of performing someday, but never believed he was good enough. I told him he was more than good enough. I told him he was brave.